Hello there, and welcome back to Bedtime Science. I'm really glad you're here tonight. Ancient Egypt is not just a collection of pyramids, mummies, and golden masks. It is one of the longest-lasting literate civilizations in human history, a society that built its world along a river, measured time by stars and floods, turned stone into monuments of astonishing precision, and left behind enough writing, art, tools, tombs, houses, medical texts, accounts, and ordinary personal objects for us to reconstruct not only its kings and gods, but the texture of daily life. The story stretches across more than 3,000 years of dynastic rule, from the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BCE to the death of Cleopatra VII in 30 BCE, after which Egypt became a Roman province. 3,000 years is a span of time so vast that the Great Pyramid was already nearly 2,500 years old when Cleopatra was born. The temples at Luxor were built more than 1,000 years after the Pyramid Age, reminding us that ancient Egypt itself contained layers of deep antiquity. What makes Egypt so absorbing is not only that it was old, or powerful, or visually spectacular. It is that the evidence survived. The desert preserved papyrus, wood, linen, paint, food, sandals, letters, toys, tools, human bodies, animal mummies, workers' villages, unfinished statues, quarry marks, and jokes scratched on stone by people who never imagined that anyone thousands of years later would be reading over their shoulder. Egypt lets the ancient world feel unusually near. So tonight, we move through the science, archaeology, engineering, medicine, belief, and daily life of ancient Egypt slowly. Not as mythology, not as a mystery that needs impossible explanations, but as a human achievement, organized, practical, imaginative, sometimes strange, and still capable of making the modern world pause. Ancient Egypt was made possible by the Nile. Without it, the region would have been an extension of the Sahara, one of the harshest deserts on Earth. The Nile flows northward through northeastern Africa for approximately 6,650 kilometers, making it one of the longest river systems in the world by the usual measurements, before emptying into the Mediterranean Sea through a broad delta. The Nile's annual flood, caused by monsoon rains falling on the Ethiopian highlands each summer, inundated the floodplain each year between June and September, depositing a thin layer of extraordinarily fertile black silt. The Egyptians called this land Kemet, the Black Land, across the otherwise barren desert. This annual replenishment of soil nutrients meant that the Nile Valley could be farmed intensively year after year without the exhaustion of soil that limited agriculture elsewhere, and it made Egypt one of the most productive agricultural regions in the ancient world. Everything that Egypt became, its wealth, its surplus, its ability to support a large non-agricultural population of priests, scribes, artists, soldiers, and builders, rested on the black silt deposited by a river that rose in mountains thousands of kilometers to the south. The ancient Egyptians divided their land into two fundamental categories. Kemet, the Black Land, referred to the narrow strip of fertile soil along the Nile banks and in the delta, the inhabited, agricultural, life-sustaining part of Egypt. Deshret, the Red Land, referred to the desert that flanked the river on both sides, a hostile, deadly, but also protective wilderness that insulated Egypt from invasion and that contained the mineral wealth, quarrying sites, and trade routes that enriched the civilization. The boundary between these two zones was precise and stark. In many parts of the Nile Valley, you could stand with one foot in irrigated farmland and the other in sand, the transition from black soil to red desert occurring within a single step. This sharp border between life and death was not merely a geographical feature, but a cosmological one. The Egyptians understood it as the boundary between the ordered world of civilization and the chaos beyond it. The chronology of ancient Egypt is divided by Egyptologists into periods based on the organization of political power. The pre-dynastic period, from approximately 6000 to 3100 BCE, saw the gradual development of settled agriculture, craft production, and increasingly complex political organization along the Nile. The early dynastic period, beginning around 3100 BCE, marks the traditional unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the first pharaoh, Narmer or Menes. This was followed by the Old Kingdom, approximately 2686 to 2181 BCE, during which the Great Pyramid building age occurred. The Middle Kingdom, approximately 2055 to 1650 BCE, was an era of reunification and cultural flourishing after the first intermediate period of political fragmentation. The New Kingdom, approximately 1550 to 1069 BCE, was the period of greatest imperial expansion and includes many of the most famous pharaohs: Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Ramesses II. Between these peak periods fell intermediate periods of fragmentation and foreign domination, including the Hyksos rule of the Second Intermediate Period and the Nubian and Libyan dynasties of the Third Intermediate Period, before the Late Period ended with the Persian, Macedonian, and finally Roman conquests. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built as the tomb of Pharaoh Khufu during the Fourth Dynasty around 2560 BCE, is the only one of the seven wonders of the ancient world still standing. It stands approximately 138 meters tall today, originally approximately 146 meters before the loss of the smooth, white limestone casing stones that once covered its exterior, and its square base covers approximately 5.4 hectares. It is estimated to contain approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, many weighing around 2.5 tons each, with some blocks, especially in the internal chambers and relieving structures, weighing far more. The stones were quarried primarily from limestone deposits at Giza itself and from higher quality limestone quarried at Tura, across the river. The red granite used for the interior chambers and passages was brought from Aswan, approximately 800 kilometers to the south, along the Nile. The logistical organization required to plan, supply, and execute this project over approximately 20 years was a feat of administrative as much as engineering achievement. The precision of the Great Pyramid's construction is extraordinary even by modern standards. The base of the pyramid is level to within approximately 21 millimeters across its entire extent. The four sides of the base are aligned to the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west, with an accuracy of within approximately 3 to 4 minutes of arc, or approximately 1/20th of a degree. The four sides of the base are equal in length to within approximately 58 millimeters. How this precision was achieved by ancient engineers without modern surveying equipment remains an area of active research. The alignment with the cardinal directions may have been achieved through astronomical observations, identifying true north by bisecting the arc of a circumpolar star as it moved from east to west and back, and the leveling of the base may have been achieved using water-filled channels cut in the bedrock to establish a precise horizontal datum. The precision itself suggests a level of mathematical and surveying knowledge considerably in advance of what is typically assumed for a Bronze Age civilization. The workforce that built the pyramids was not composed of slaves, as was long assumed, based largely on classical sources and later cultural mythology. Archaeological excavations conducted near Giza since the 1990s, particularly by Egyptologist Mark Leiner and his team, have uncovered the remains of a large organized settlement that housed the pyramid workers, a settlement with bakeries, breweries, administrative buildings, medical facilities indicated by evidence of healed injuries, and evidence of a workforce that was housed, fed, and cared for by the state. Worker graffiti found in sealed spaces within the pyramid refers to work gangs with names including Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure, suggesting an organized workforce with group identities and some degree of esprit de corps. Skeletal analysis of workers buried in a nearby cemetery shows evidence of hard physical labor, but also of medical care, healed fractures, and other evidence of treatment of injuries, consistent with a workforce that was valued and maintained rather than simply exploited. The workforce was almost certainly composed of rotating teams of skilled and semi-skilled Egyptian workers, organized and paid in rations by the state, supplemented during the flood season when agricultural work was suspended by workers from across the country. The interior of the Great Pyramid contains 3 known chambers connected by passages of remarkable precision. The descending passage, which descends from the entrance on the north face at an angle of approximately 26 degrees, leads to a subterranean chamber carved into the bedrock below the pyramid. The ascending passage leads upward to the Queen's Chamber and then continues upward through the Grand Gallery to the King's Chamber. The Grand Gallery is a masterpiece of ancient corbelled stone construction, a soaring gallery approximately 47 meters long and approximately 8.5 meters tall, its walls corbelled in from both sides to create a narrow slot roof of remarkable stability. The King's Chamber, at the heart of the pyramid, is constructed of red granite and contains only an empty, open sarcophagus. The purpose of the subterranean chamber and the Queen's Chamber, whether they represent abandoned or redesigned burial plans, whether they served ritual purposes, whether they encode astronomical or religious symbolism, remains debated among Egyptologists. The Sphinx at Giza is carved from the bedrock of the Giza Plateau itself, from an outcrop of limestone left after the quarrying operations that supplied stone for the pyramid construction. It is approximately 73 meters long and approximately 20 meters tall, with a body far wider than a person expects when standing beside it, with a human head bearing the face traditionally identified as Pharaoh Khafre on a lion's body. The Sphinx faces due east, aligned with the rising sun. Its date of construction is generally assigned to the reign of Khafre, approximately 2558 to 2532 BCE, based on the nearby Khafre Valley Temple and its position relative to the Khafre Pyramid Complex. The Sphinx spent most of its history buried to the neck in desert sand, and the body is significantly better preserved than the head as a result of this protection. The nose was deliberately removed at some point in the past. A commonly repeated story attributes this to Napoleon's artillery, but it was already missing by the time of Napoleon's Egyptian campaign, as documented in earlier drawings. Writing was one of ancient Egypt's most consequential and most distinctive cultural achievements. Egyptian hieroglyphics, the pictographic and ideographic writing system used for monumental inscriptions, were developed around 3200 to 3100 BCE, roughly contemporary with the development of cuneiform writing in Mesopotamia. The system is complex. It includes logograms that represent words or concepts directly, phonetic signs that represent single consonantal sounds, and determinatives that classify the meaning of a word without being pronounced. Egyptian was written without vowels, as were most ancient Semitic writing systems, meaning that the exact pronunciation of ancient Egyptian is inferred rather than known with certainty. In addition to hieroglyphics, the Egyptians developed 2 cursive scripts for everyday administrative and literary purposes: hieratic, which was used throughout most of Egyptian history, and demotic, which developed in the late period for administrative and commercial documents. The Rosetta Stone, discovered by French soldiers during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign in 1799 and now in the British Museum, bears the same priestly decree in hieroglyphic, demotic, and Greek, and it was through comparison of the known Greek text with the unknown scripts that Jean-François Champollion and others made the key breakthroughs in deciphering Egyptian hieroglyphs in the 1820s. The papyrus plant, a tall aquatic sedge that grew abundantly in the marshy areas of the Nile Delta, was one of ancient Egypt's most important resources. Papyrus was used to make the writing material of the same name. The stem was cut into thin strips, laid in two perpendicular layers, moistened and pressed together, and the resulting sheet dried under weights to produce a smooth, durable writing surface. Papyrus was also used to make baskets, sandals, boats, and a wide range of other everyday objects. The production of papyrus in Egypt and its export around the Mediterranean world made Egypt a significant supplier of writing material to other ancient civilizations. The word paper derives ultimately from papyrus, though paper itself, made from pulped and matted plant fibers, was invented independently in China around 100 BCE. The vast majority of ancient Egyptian papyrus documents that once existed have been lost to decay, but the dry Egyptian climate has preserved a remarkable number, and the papyri that survive include administrative records, literary texts, medical treatises, magical spells, personal letters, and religious documents that provide extraordinary insight into the daily life and intellectual world of ancient Egypt. Egyptian mathematics was considerably more sophisticated than is often assumed, and several surviving papyri document the mathematical knowledge of ancient Egyptian scribes with remarkable precision. The Rhine Mathematical Papyrus, purchased in 1858 by Scottish antiquarian Alexander Henry Rhine from a dealer in Luxor, and now primarily in the British Museum, dates to approximately 1550 BCE and contains 84 mathematical problems with solutions, covering arithmetic, geometry, fractions, and practical problems in measurement and resource allocation. The Moscow Mathematical Papyrus, held in Moscow's Pushkin Museum of Fine Arts, contains 25 problems, including a remarkably accurate calculation of the volume of a truncated pyramid. Egyptian mathematics used a system of unit fractions, all fractions expressed as sums of fractions with numerator 1, that required sophisticated tables and methods for manipulation. Their calculation of the area of a circle, using the approximation that the area of a circle equals the area of a square with side equal to 8/9 of the diameter, gives an implicit value of pi of approximately 3.16, correct to within less than 1% of the true value, a remarkable approximation for a civilization of that era. Egyptian medicine was one of the most advanced medical traditions of the ancient world, and it shows a pragmatic, observational approach to healing alongside the magical and religious elements expected in its cultural setting. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating to approximately 1600 BCE, but probably preserving material from an older tradition, is the oldest known surgical text in human history. It describes 48 cases of injuries and conditions in a systematic format: examination, diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis, with cases classified as treatable, uncertain, or not to be treated. It shows a clear recognition that injuries to the head, spine, and neck could affect movement, sensation, and bodily function elsewhere, a remarkably careful clinical insight for its time. The Ebers Papyrus, also dating to approximately 1550 BCE, contains hundreds of remedies and prescriptions for conditions ranging from skin disease to eye problems to internal disorders, using plant, animal, and mineral ingredients in combinations that mix empirical observation with ritual language. Egyptian physicians also paid close attention to the heart, pulse, and vessels, though their understanding was not the same as modern circulation. They did not know, in the modern physiological sense, that blood circulates in a closed loop pumped by the heart. But they did recognize the heart as central to the body's channels and understood the pulse as a clinically meaningful sign, which made their medicine unusually systematic for the ancient world. The pharaoh was not simply a king in the modern sense, but a divine figure, a living god, or at minimum, a being intermediate between gods and humans. The pharaoh was understood to be the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed god of kingship, and upon death was identified with Osiris, the ruler of the dead. The pharaoh's role was not merely political but cosmic. It was the pharaoh who maintained Ma'at, the cosmic principle of truth, justice, balance, and proper order, and through ritual action sustained the universe itself against the forces of chaos. The pharaoh performed the essential religious rituals or delegated them to priests who acted in his name, and was responsible for the flooding of the Nile, the rising of the sun, and the proper ordering of all things. This theological framework gave the pharaoh an authority and a legitimacy that extended beyond human political power. The pharaoh was not merely the most powerful human being, but the mediating point between humanity and the divine order that sustained reality itself. Hatshepsut, who ruled as pharaoh of the New Kingdom 18th dynasty from approximately 1478 to 1458 BCE, is one of the most remarkable figures in Egyptian history. She was a woman who ruled as pharaoh, not as queen regent for a minor son, though she began in that role, but as full pharaoh in her own right, wearing the double crown and the false beard of kingship and represented in official art as male. She was one of the most prolific builders among the New Kingdom pharaohs, responsible for the construction of the mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, one of the most architecturally sophisticated monuments in all of Egyptian architecture, and for the erection of two massive obelisks at Karnak, the tallest surviving ancient obelisks in Egypt. She also organized and led a major trading expedition to the land of Punt, a distant and exotic trading partner thought to be located in the Horn of Africa, that returned with luxury goods including live myrrh trees, ebony, ivory, gold, and exotic animals. Approximately 20 years after her death, her successor Thutmose III had her images and cartouches systematically removed from monuments and her statues buried in a pit at Deir el-Bahri, possibly to eliminate a precedent for female rule or to ensure his son's clear succession. She was largely forgotten for thousands of years until modern archaeology reconstructed her extraordinary reign. The New Kingdom pharaoh Ramesses II, who ruled from approximately 1279 to 1213 BCE, a reign of approximately 66 years, one of the longest in Egyptian history, was one of the most prolific monument builders in history. He built or enlarged temples throughout Egypt and Nubia, including the extraordinary temples at Abu Simbel, carved directly into the cliff face of a sandstone mountain near the modern Sudanese border, with four colossal seated statues of Ramesses himself, each approximately 20 meters tall, flanking the entrance. His reign completed major decoration in the Great Hypostyle Hall at Karnak, begun under Seti I, one of the largest and most astonishing columned spaces of the ancient world, with 134 massive columns and a central aisle of columns rising to about 21 meters, and he added his cartouche to an extraordinary number of monuments throughout Egypt, some of which had been built by earlier pharaohs. Ramesses fought the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh around 1274 BCE, the earliest battle in recorded history for which detailed accounts survive, and subsequently concluded one of the earliest surviving peace treaties in recorded history, a replica of which is displayed at the United Nations headquarters in New York. He fathered approximately 100 children by multiple wives and concubines, and lived to approximately 90 years of age, extraordinarily long for the ancient world, and his mummy, now in the Cairo Museum, shows the physical evidence of his long life, including severe arthritis and dental abscesses. Akhenaten, who ruled as pharaoh from approximately 1353 to 1336 BCE during the 18th dynasty, carried out one of the most dramatic religious revolutions in ancient history. Born Amenhotep IV, he changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning beneficial to the Aten, and abandoned the traditional Egyptian polytheistic religion in favor of an essentially monotheistic worship of the Aten, the solar disk. He closed the temples of the traditional gods, diverted their revenues to the Aten cult, and built an entirely new capital city called Akhetaten, now known as Amarna, in a virgin desert location midway between Memphis and Thebes. The art produced during his reign departed radically from centuries of Egyptian artistic convention, depicting the royal family in a naturalistic and intimate style, playing with their children, offering to the Aten, embracing, that has no parallel before or after in Egyptian official art. Whether Akhenaten's religious revolution represented genuine spiritual conviction, political strategy to break the power of the Ammonius priesthood, the old god's priesthood had accumulated enormous wealth and influence, or some combination remains debated. After his death, his religious revolution was largely reversed by his successors. His name was erased from monuments, his city was abandoned, and the traditional Egyptian religion was restored. His young successor Tutankhamun, born to Tankhaten, changed his name to reflect the restoration of Ammonius worship and moved the royal court back toward the traditional centers of power. Tutankhamun, whose reign is usually placed in the late 14th century BCE and who died at approximately 18 or 19 years of age, would be a relatively minor figure in Egyptian history if not for the discovery of his nearly intact tomb in the Valley of the Kings in November 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter, funded by Lord Carnarvon. The tomb, designated KV62, was virtually undisturbed when Carter entered it, slightly disturbed by ancient robbers who had entered but apparently been caught, and the tomb resealed by officials, and contained approximately 5,000 objects including the famous Golden Death Mask, 3 golden coffins nested within each other, elaborately painted furniture, jewelry, clothing, weapons, food offerings, and ritual objects. The discovery was a global sensation, described in newspapers worldwide and generating what became known as Egyptomania, a widespread popular fascination with ancient Egypt. The objects from the tomb took 10 years to fully document and remove, and the death mask of Tutankhamun has since become one of the most recognized objects in the history of art and archaeology. The cause of Tutankhamun's early death has been debated for decades, with various proposals including murder, genetic disease, infection, and accident, with DNA and CT-based research suggesting malaria infection and bone disease or injury as likely contributing factors, though the exact chain of events remains debated. The Valley of the Kings, located on the west bank of the Nile, near modern Luxor, was the primary burial site of New Kingdom pharaohs and elite officials from approximately 1539 to 1075 BCE. It contains approximately 63 known tombs, though some are simple pits while others are elaborate multi-chambered complexes extending deep into the limestone cliffs. The west bank of the Nile was associated with death and the setting sun in Egyptian cosmology, making it the traditional location for funerary monuments. The tombs in the Valley of the Kings were designed to be hidden, cut into the cliffs, and concealed, in contrast to the earlier pyramid tombs that advertised their contents to potential robbers. This strategy was only partially successful. Virtually all of the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings were robbed in antiquity, some within decades of the original burial, and the Egyptian authorities periodically collected the mummified remains of disturbed kings and rewrapped and reburied them in hidden caches for protection. Tutankhamun's near-intact tomb was an exception, its concealment aided by debris from the later cutting of another tomb that covered its entrance. The Egyptian afterlife beliefs were extraordinarily complex and were refined and elaborated over the 3,000 years of dynastic history, with different traditions, texts, and beliefs coexisting, and overlapping rather than being resolved into a single coherent system. The dead were understood to possess multiple spiritual components, including the Ka, a kind of vital life force or double that needed to be sustained by offerings of food and drink. The Ba, something closer to what we might call personality or individual spirit, depicted as a human-headed bird that could travel between the tomb and the living world. And the Ak, the effective, glorified spirit of the deceased who had successfully passed through the afterlife judgment. The judgment of the dead, depicted with remarkable consistency in the Book of the Dead and other funerary texts, involved the weighing of the deceased's heart against the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth and justice, in the presence of Osiris, the jackal-headed Anubis, the ibis-headed Thoth who recorded the judgment, and 42 assessors representing different aspects of moral behavior. If the heart was found to be balanced with the feather, the deceased was admitted to the field of reeds, an idealized version of Egypt where they would live eternally in peace and plenty. If the heart was heavier than the feather, burdened by sin, it was fed to Ammit, a composite monster combining crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, and the deceased was annihilated. Mummification was the physical process by which the Egyptians attempted to preserve the body for use in the afterlife, and it evolved considerably over the 3,000 years of dynastic history. The earliest mummies were accidental, bodies buried in the hot, dry desert, sand naturally desiccated, and were preserved without any deliberate treatment. As elite burial practices shifted to stone-lined tombs and coffins that separated the body from the desiccating sand, artificial mummification became necessary to achieve the same preservation. By the New Kingdom, the process had become standardized. The body was first washed and purified. The brain was removed through the nostrils using hooked tools and discarded, as the Egyptians did not regard the brain as the seat of intelligence. The internal organs, liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines, were removed through an incision in the left side and preserved separately in 4 canopic jars with stoppers in the form of the 4 sons of Horus, Imsidi, Hapi, Duamutef, and Kabisanof. The heart was left in the body as it was the seat of consciousness and would be needed for the judgment. The body cavities were packed with natron, a naturally occurring salt compound found in dry lake beds in Egypt, and the body was covered with natron and left to desiccate for approximately 40 days. The dried body was then wrapped in hundreds of meters of linen bandages, with amulets and protective texts placed between the layers at specific anatomical positions, and the wrapped mummy was placed in a series of nested coffins. The entire process for a royal mummy could take approximately 70 days, coordinated with the 70-day period of invisibility of the star Sirius, associated with the goddess Isis, and the period of inundation of the Nile. The canopic jars used to store the preserved internal organs of the mummified deceased were sealed with stoppers representing the 4 sons of Horus. Imsidi, with a human head, protected the liver. Hapi, with a baboon head, protected the lungs. Duamutef, with a jackal head, protected the stomach, and Kabisanof, with a falcon head, protected the intestines. These 4 deities were in turn protected by the 4 tutelary goddesses, Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Selkut, often depicted with arms outstretched as if embracing or protecting the jars. In earlier periods, the jars held the actual organs. In later periods, the mummified organs were sometimes rewrapped and placed back inside the mummy, and dummy canopic jars with solid interiors were placed in the tomb as symbolic representations of the organ's preservation. The kidneys were typically left in the body and were not preserved in canopic jars, though exactly how Egyptian embalmers understood them is less clear than the ritual importance assigned to the heart, liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines. The Book of the Dead is a modern name for the collection of spells and formulae that the Egyptians called the Book of Coming Forth by Day, instructions for the deceased on how to navigate the dangers of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, and emerge successfully into the afterlife. It was not a single canonical text, but a collection of spells that changed and expanded over time, with individual copies produced for specific patrons and containing a selection of the available spells tailored to that person's needs and means. Wealthy individuals could afford beautifully illustrated papyrus scrolls containing many spells. Poorer individuals might have only a few spells written on linen wrappings. The spells address a wide range of afterlife challenges. Spells to prevent the heart from testifying against the deceased during the weighing ceremony. Spells to transform the deceased into various powerful forms: a lotus, a swallow, a crocodile, a phoenix, to move through the underworld, spells against specific demons and dangers, and spells to ensure the continued provision of food and other necessities. The consistency of these spells across different versions and centuries reflects a sophisticated and widely shared understanding of the afterlife cosmology. The ancient Egyptian pantheon was populated by thousands of deities, ranging from cosmic powers to local protective spirits, many of which were depicted in hybrid human-animal or fully animal form. The major deities included Ra or Re, the sun god, who crossed the sky in a solar bark by day and journeyed through the underworld by night, battling the serpent Apophis who threatened to destroy him and prevent the sun from rising. Osiris, god of the dead and resurrection, whose myth, killed by his brother Set, his body scattered, reassembled and mummified by his wife Isis, avenged by his son Horus, became the template for the Egyptian understanding of death and resurrection. Isis, the Great, mother goddess and magician. Horus, the falcon-headed sky god and divine embodiment of kingship, whose left eye was the moon and right eye the sun. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing, wisdom, and time, who invented hieroglyphics. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and guide of the dead. Hathor, the cow-headed goddess of love, music, and joy. Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and pestilence, and many others. Many deities were syncretized over time. Ra merged with Ammonius to become Onius Ra, combining the solar and creation aspects of both, and the roles and attributes of deities shifted over the centuries as theological traditions developed and merged. The temples of ancient Egypt were not places of public worship in the way that churches or mosques function today. They were understood to be the literal dwelling places of the divine, the residence of the deity in their cult statue, and access was strictly restricted. Only priests who had undergone extensive ritual purification could enter the inner sanctuaries. The general public participated in religious life primarily during festivals, when the cult statue was carried through the streets in a sacred bark, allowing people to approach and receive the oracle of the deity. The daily temple ritual involved awakening the god, washing and dressing and feeding the cult statue, and performing purification rituals, reenacting the creation of the world and maintaining the cosmic order. The extraordinary scale and elaborateness of temples like Karnak and Luxor, with their massive pylons, hypostyle halls, sacred lakes, obelisks, and inner sanctuaries, reflected the theological importance of the dwelling place and the wealth of the institution. Since temples accumulated vast landholdings, herds, workshops, and administrative bureaucracies over centuries of royal patronage and private donations. The temple complex at Karnak, near modern Luxor, was built and added to by approximately 30 different pharaohs over a period of approximately 2,000 years, making it one of the most extensively constructed religious sites in human history. The complex is dedicated primarily to the god Ammonius and covers approximately 100 hectares. The Great Hypostyle Hall alone covers roughly 5,000 square meters and is one of the largest column spaces ever built in stone. The complex includes multiple temples, a sacred lake, obelisks, ram-headed sphinx avenues, administrative buildings, and the remains of residences and workshops that housed and supported the temple's extensive personnel. The walls and columns of Karnak are covered with carved and painted reliefs and inscriptions that, if read as a sequence, constitute one of the most extensive religious and historical archives from the ancient world. The Karnak cachette, discovered in 1903, yielded approximately 17,000 bronze statuettes and approximately 700 stone statues, ritual objects, and stelae, all buried in a pit within the temple complex when space became insufficient to retain them above ground. The obelisk was one of ancient Egypt's most distinctive architectural forms, a tall, narrow, four-sided tapering shaft of stone capped with a pyramidion, typically covered in gold or electrum, that acted as a sunlight reflector. Obelisks were quarried from single pieces of granite, typically from Aswan, and could weigh hundreds of tons. The largest surviving ancient obelisk, the Lateran obelisk, now in Rome, weighs approximately 455 tons and was originally erected at Karnak by Thutmose III. Transporting obelisks from the quarry at Aswan to their intended locations, often hundreds of kilometers down the Nile, required enormous boats capable of bearing their weight and the organizational capability to move them from boat to their final upright position. How the Egyptians transported and erected these massive monoliths without wheeled vehicles, cranes, or any of the mechanical equipment we would consider essential is not fully resolved, with various proposals including mud brick ramp systems for lowering them upright into prepared sockets. Approximately 30 Egyptian obelisks stand outside Egypt today, distributed among Rome, Paris, London, New York, Istanbul, and other cities as antiquities collected by later civilizations. The Egyptians were skilled astronomers who used celestial observations for calendar keeping, religious purposes, and the alignment of monuments. Their civil calendar consisted of 3 seasons of 4 months each: inundation, when the Nile flooded; emergence, when the floodwaters receded and crops were planted; and harvest, making 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 epigomenal days added at the end of the year to bring the total to 365 days. This was one of the earliest solar calendars in history, and it closely approximates the true solar year. Though without a leap year correction, it gradually drifted out of synchronization with the actual seasons over centuries. The Egyptians also used a lunar calendar for religious festivals. The heliacal rising of Sirius, the day when Sirius first becomes visible above the horizon at dawn after approximately 70 days of invisibility, was used to mark the start of the new year and correlated with the onset of the Nile flood, making Sirius a critically important astronomical object in Egyptian religious and agricultural life. Sirius was associated with the goddess Isis, and its annual disappearance and reappearance were understood as mirroring Osiris's death and resurrection. The agricultural economy of ancient Egypt operated on a tripartite division of land and labor. The land along the Nile was owned technically by the pharaoh, who distributed it to temples, officials, and cultivators in exchange for taxes paid in grain. After the annual flood receded, farmers planted wheat and barley on the renewed soil and irrigated their crops from the river using simple irrigation channels and devices including the shaduf, a counterweight lever used to lift water from the river into irrigation channels, and later the Archimedes screw and water wheel. Surplus grain was collected by the state and stored in granaries that functioned as the primary reserve against famine and as the medium through which the state paid workers, soldiers, and officials. The prosperity of Egypt was directly tied to the height of the Nile flood, too low and crops would fail from insufficient water and silt. Too high and settlements would be inundated. The Nilometer, a graduated column or staircase used to measure the height of the Nile flood, was therefore a critical instrument of state, and its readings were used both to calibrate the tax burden on farmers and to predict the agricultural season's prospects. Cats were sacred animals in ancient Egypt, associated particularly with the goddess Batet, who was depicted as a cat or as a woman with a cat's head and was associated with protection, fertility, and the home. Egypt played one of the earliest major roles in the history of domestic cats, whose ancestry is traced by genetic analysis to the Near Eastern wildcat, Felis sylvestris libica, and whose close relationship with human settlements grew around grain storage, rodents, and household protection in the Fertile Crescent in Egypt. Cats were valued for their ability to protect grain stores from rodents and to kill snakes, but they also became deeply embedded in Egyptian religious and cultural life. Classical writers claim that Egyptians treated the killing of cats with extreme seriousness, though those accounts should be read with some caution. When a household cat died, some families are said to have shaved their eyebrows in mourning. Cat amulets were widely used as protective objects, and the goddess Bastet's cult center at Bubastis in the Delta attracted enormous festivals involving music, dancing, and, according to ancient accounts, enormous consumption of wine. Millions of cat mummies have been found in Egyptian archaeological sites, produced as religious offerings, and some ancient sites contain veritable cemeteries of mummified cats deposited over generations of worshippers. The Nile crocodile was both feared and venerated in ancient Egypt. Sobuk, the crocodile-headed god, was one of the more powerful deities in the Egyptian pantheon, associated with pharaonic power, fertility, and the waters of the Nile. In certain regions of Egypt, crocodiles were kept in temple pools and fed, decorated with gold jewelry, and treated as living embodiments of the deity. The presence of crocodiles in the Nile was a real and constant danger to anyone working, bathing, or drawing water from the river, and the cult of Sobuk may have developed partly as a way of propitiating the dangerous power of these animals. The Fayum region, a large oasis west of the Nile connected to the river by a natural channel, was particularly associated with crocodile worship, and its ancient Greek name was Crocodilopolis. Mummified crocodiles found in Egyptian temples and tombs, along with mummified crocodile eggs and preserved crocodile hatchlings, attest to the widespread practice of crocodile veneration. Egyptian art followed a strict set of conventions that persisted with remarkable consistency across 3,000 years of dynastic history, modified but never fundamentally altered by changing styles and royal preferences. The human figure in Egyptian painting and relief was depicted according to a system of composite representation. The head was shown in profile, with the eye shown frontally. The torso was shown frontally. The hips, legs, and feet were shown in profile. This system, which appears anatomically impossible to modern eyes, was not an inability to observe or represent the human form realistically, but a deliberate choice to represent each part of the body in its most informative aspect. The eye is most clearly depicted frontally, the foot in profile. The size of figures in Egyptian art was determined not by perspective, but by social importance. The pharaoh was always the largest figure in any scene, followed by gods and high officials, with commoners and servants depicted much smaller. This hieratic scale reflected the cosmic hierarchy rather than the visual appearance of the scene. The Egyptian love poem tradition, preserved in papyri from the New Kingdom period approximately 1550 to 1069 BCE, reveals a sophisticated lyric poetry tradition that is remarkably direct and emotionally resonant across the distance of 3,000 years. The poems, collected in several papyri including the Harris 500 papyrus and the Chester Beatty papyrus, are written in the voices of lovers, male and female, describing longing, desire, the beauty of the beloved, and the joy and pain of love with an intimacy and a literary sophistication that places them among the finest love poetry of antiquity. The beloved is described through natural imagery. The voice of the beloved's brother makes a beloved's heart flutter like a branch in the wind. The beloved is as perfect as the red lotus on the water. The poems describe stolen meetings, the beloved watching from a rooftop, the beloved turning away to play with a friend while the poet's heart follows. Reading these poems, it is not difficult to feel the presence of fully human individuals across the gap of 3,000 years. The Egyptian system of numerals used a hierarchical additive system based on powers of 10, with different symbols for 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and 1 million. To write a number, you repeated the appropriate symbol the required number of times. 342 would require 3 repetitions of the 100 symbol, 4 repetitions of the 10 symbol, and 2 repetitions of the unit symbol. This system was adequate for the administrative calculations of Egyptian scribes, measuring fields, calculating grain rations, recording taxes, but is cumbersome for arithmetic compared to the positional notation system that was eventually adopted. Egyptian fractions, as mentioned earlier, were expressed as sums of unit fractions, requiring elaborate tables of fraction decompositions for calculation. Despite these limitations, Egyptian scribes performed calculations of considerable complexity, computing volumes of cylindrical granaries, determining the slope of pyramid faces, calculating the rations needed to feed a workforce, with a practical facility that has been demonstrated by analysis of the mathematical papyri. Beer was one of the most important foods in ancient Egyptian society, consumed daily by people of all social classes and used as a medium of payment. Egyptian beer, called heket, was produced primarily from fermented bread. Emmer wheat or barley bread was soaked in water, allowed to ferment, and strained through baskets to remove the solids, producing a thick, nutritious beverage with a relatively low alcohol content. Large quantities were produced daily by bakeries attached to major estates and temples, and workers on state projects including pyramid building were paid partly in bread and beer rations. Daily rations for workers typically included approximately 10 loaves of bread and perhaps 1 to 2 jugs of beer. Beer was not simply an alcoholic beverage, but a significant source of calories and nutrition. The fermentation process produced B vitamins, and the liquid provided hydration. In a culture where water from the Nile was frequently contaminated and where the caloric demands of manual labor were considerable, numerous models of bakeries and breweries have been found in Egyptian tombs, and the production of bread and beer for the eternal nourishment of the deceased was a central concern of funerary preparations. Linen was the primary textile of ancient Egypt, produced from the flax plant, which was grown extensively along the Nile. The quality of Egyptian linen ranged from coarse fabric used for everyday clothing to extremely fine cloth, so fine that it was described by ancient writers as woven air, used for elite garments and temple offerings. The production of linen involved a complex sequence of processes: retting the flax stalks to loosen the fibers, hackling to separate and align the fibers, spinning the fibers into thread on hand spindles, and weaving on horizontal or vertical looms. Linen was used for clothing, bedding, bandages, sails, and many other purposes, and the hundreds of meters of linen used in the mummification of a single royal body gives some sense of the scale of linen production required to sustain Egyptian funerary practices alone. Wool was known but considered ritually impure and was rarely used for formal or priestly clothing, though it was used for practical purposes. The role of women in ancient Egyptian society was, by the standards of the ancient world and of most subsequent historical periods, remarkably advanced. Egyptian women could own property, enter into legal contracts, conduct business, initiate divorce, appear in court as witnesses, inherit on equal terms with men, and in some cases achieve positions of considerable authority in temple administration and other institutions. Marriage was a private arrangement rather than a public legal institution, and divorce was possible for both spouses. Some women from elite families received education, and a small number of women are known or plausibly inferred to have been literate. Though literacy remained limited overall, women are also depicted throughout Egyptian art in active, dignified, and sometimes powerful roles. The most extreme expression of this was the pharaoh Hatshepsut, who ruled with full royal power, but she was not entirely without precedent. Sobenferu of the 12th dynasty is generally accepted as an earlier female pharaoh, while later king lists preserve names such as Nitocris, whose historicity remains debated. This relative status of women was not universal across all aspects of Egyptian society. Most positions of formal public authority were occupied by men, but the legal and property rights of Egyptian women were significantly more extensive than in contemporary Greek or later Roman society. The ancient Egyptians traded extensively throughout the ancient world, accessing goods that Egypt itself did not produce. The land of Punt, reached by expeditions through the Red Sea, supplied myrrh, frankincense, ebony, gold, ivory, animal skins, and live animals. Nubia, to the south, was a source of gold, amethyst, carnelian, ivory, ebony, cattle, and slaves. The Sinai Peninsula contained the turquoise and copper mines that Egyptian expeditions worked from the Old Kingdom onward. Lebanon supplied the cedar wood that Egypt lacked, critical for ship and furniture building. The Aegean Islands and the Levant supplied wine, olive oil, silver, copper, and tin for bronze production. Trade was not merely a commercial enterprise, but a politically significant activity, with foreign rulers receiving Egyptian luxury goods as diplomatic gifts and returning equivalent goods to the pharaoh, the exchange maintaining diplomatic relationships and the prestige of all parties. The Amarna letters, approximately 350 clay tablets found at the city of Akhetaten, record the diplomatic correspondence of Akhenaten and his immediate predecessors with rulers of Babylon, Assyria, the Hittites, Mitanni, and the Levantine city-states, providing an extraordinary window into the diplomatic world of the Late Bronze Age and Egypt's central position within it. Before the pyramids, before the pharaohs, and before the grand temples, there were small farming communities along the Nile. During the pre-dynastic period, villages developed local styles of pottery, burial, trade, and political organization. Archaeologists identify phases such as Badarian, Naqada I, Naqada II, and Naqada III not because people living then would have used those names, but because their pottery, graves, tools, and settlement patterns change in recognizable ways over time. In those centuries before unification, Egypt was not yet a single kingdom. It was a chain of communities competing, exchanging, absorbing ideas, and gradually building the social complexity that would make kingship possible. The unification of Egypt around 3100 BCE is traditionally associated with Narmer, whose famous ceremonial palette shows a king wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt on one side and the red crown of Lower Egypt on the other. The Narmer palette is not simply a picture of one event. It is a statement of political theology. It shows the king as conqueror, ritual performer, and cosmic stabilizer. The images are arranged not as a literal battlefield report, but as a visual argument. The two lands have been brought together, disorder has been subdued, and the king stands at the center of a newly ordered world. In Egyptian political thought, rule was never only administrative. It was cosmic. The double crown of Egypt symbolized that union. The white crown represented Upper Egypt, the long Nile Valley in the south. The red crown represented Lower Egypt, the broad Nile Delta in the north. This seems counterintuitive if you picture a modern map, where north is at the top, but the Egyptians named Upper and Lower Egypt according to the direction of the river's flow. The Nile flows northward, so Upper Egypt is upstream and Lower Egypt downstream. The geography of the river shaped the language of the state itself. To travel south was to go upstream. To travel north was to go downstream. The country was imagined through the body of the river. The Nile also shaped the Egyptian calendar in a way that made time agricultural, astronomical, and sacred all at once. The year was divided into 3 seasons: Ake, the inundation; Parate, the emergence of land and planting; and Shimu, the harvest. Each season contained 4 months of 30 days, followed by 5 extra days at the end of the year. This produced a 365-day civil calendar, one of the earliest solar calendars known. It did not include the extra quarter day of the true solar year, so it slowly drifted against the seasons, but for administrative purposes, it was wonderfully simple. Scribes could plan rations, labor, taxes, festivals, and royal projects with a stable accounting calendar. The heliacal rising of Sirius mattered because it tied the sky to the river. After a period of invisibility, Sirius reappeared just before dawn around the time when the Nile flood was expected. The star's return was associated with renewal, with Isis, and with the beginning of the year. This does not mean Egyptian agriculture was magically controlled by a star. It means the Egyptians noticed a reliable celestial marker that helped structure religious and seasonal time. Ancient science often grew from this kind of practical attention. The repeated observation of cycles, the comparison of sky and water, and the transformation of pattern into calendar. The flood was generous, but it was not perfectly predictable. A low inundation could mean hunger, tax crisis, and political anxiety. A flood too high could destroy homes, dikes, and fields. This is why measuring the Nile was a matter of state interest. Nilometers, staircases, columns, or wells calibrated to the height of the river allowed officials to monitor the flood and estimate the likely agricultural yield. The measurement of water became the measurement of wealth. From that measurement followed taxation, grain storage, temple provisions, labor obligations, and the stability of the state. Egypt's bureaucracy began with mud, water, and numbers. The Egyptian state depended on scribes. To be a scribe was to belong to a specialized class trained in reading, writing, mathematics, copying, and administration. Scribes measured fields after the flood, recorded taxes, counted cattle, issued rations, copied religious texts, managed construction materials, and kept the memory of the state alive. In a world where most people were farmers, scribal literacy was a form of power. It made a person useful to temples, royal offices, estates, and the army. Scribal training was difficult and repetitive, involving copying model texts and moral instructions again and again until the hand and mind learned the habits of the profession. The scribal palette itself was a simple and elegant tool, a narrow wooden board with depressions for ink cakes and a slot for reed pens. Black ink, made from carbon soot, was used for ordinary text. Red ink, made from iron oxide, was used for headings, corrections, emphasis, dangerous words, and the names of hostile forces in magical contexts. The contrast of black and red structured the page visually and conceptually. Even the writing materials carried a small map of order and warning. A scribe working by lamplight with a reed pen was not merely recording words. He was participating in one of the most important technologies of civilization, durable memory. Hieroglyphs were sacred and monumental, but Egyptian writing was not limited to beautiful carvings on temple walls. Hieratic script allowed faster handwriting for literary, religious, and administrative work. Demotic, which emerged later, was even more cursive and efficient for legal and commercial documents. This matters because a civilization cannot run on monumental inscriptions alone. Grain accounts, tax lists, letters, receipts, wills, work rosters, medical recipes, and private contracts all required faster scripts. The daily Egypt preserved on papyrus and ostraca, flakes of limestone or pottery used as cheap writing surfaces, is often more revealing than royal inscriptions because it shows ordinary problems, missing tools, late workers, family disputes, and complaints about supplies. Ostraca are among the most human objects from ancient Egypt. Because papyrus was valuable, people used broken pottery and limestone chips for rough notes, sketches, drafts, school exercises, and casual writing. Some ostraca preserve beautiful drawings of animals, gods, dancers, musicians, or workers. Others preserve jokes, letters, lists, or practice signs by students still learning to write. They are the scrap paper of the ancient world, and for that reason, they can feel more immediate than formal monuments. A temple inscription speaks in the voice of the state. An ostracon can speak in the voice of a tired worker, an impatient teacher, or an artist making a quick study of a cat. The village of Deir el-Medina, near the Valley of the Kings, is one of the richest sources for ordinary life in ancient Egypt. It housed the skilled workers who cut and decorated royal tombs during the New Kingdom. Because the site was relatively isolated and because its written materials survived in large numbers, we know an extraordinary amount about its inhabitants, their names, families, absences from work, disputes, wages, religious practices, medical problems, and legal cases. These were not anonymous laborers. They were highly skilled artisans, draftsmen, painters, stonecutters, carpenters, and administrators whose work created some of the most beautiful tomb decoration ever made. Deir el-Medina also preserves one of the earliest known labor strikes in recorded history. During the reign of Ramesses III, around 1150 BCE, workers stopped work because their grain rations were overdue. They marched to temples and administrative buildings, sat down, and demanded payment. The surviving accounts are striking because the workers do not appear as rebellious criminals, but as state employees insisting that the administration fulfill its obligations. They had built tombs for kings and knew the value of their labor. The strike reminds us that ancient Egypt was not simply a world of obedient subjects and divine kings. It was a working society with wages, delays, frustrations, negotiations, and people who knew when they had been treated unfairly. Egyptian houses were usually built from mud brick, not stone. Stone was for temples, tombs, and eternity. Mud brick was for living. A typical house had thick walls that helped regulate temperature, small windows to reduce heat, flat roofs used for sleeping or working in the cooler evening air, and rooms arranged around practical domestic needs. Wealthier houses could include reception rooms, private chambers, storage areas, kitchens, courtyards, and even small gardens or pools. The mud brick rarely survives as dramatically as stone temples, but where settlements have been excavated, they reveal a practical architecture adapted to heat, dust, family life, storage, and work. Bread and beer were the foundations of the Egyptian diet. Bread could be made from emmer wheat or barley and shaped in many forms. Beer was thick, nutritious, mildly alcoholic, and consumed daily by adults and children in forms very different from modern clear beer. Together, they provided calories, carbohydrates, and some nutrients. Onions, garlic, leeks, lentils, chickpeas, cucumbers, melons, figs, dates, grapes, fish, fowl, and occasional meat-added variety. The elite ate more meat, wine, honey, and luxury foods, but the basic rhythm of Egyptian nourishment remained deeply tied to grain, river, garden, and herd. The Egyptian kitchen was smoky, practical, and labor-intensive. Grinding grain by hand on stone querns was hard work and left microscopic grit in the flour, which contributed to tooth wear. Many mummies show severe dental abrasion, abscesses, and tooth loss, not because Egyptian food was primitive, but because stone ground flour carried tiny mineral particles into every loaf. The mouth of a wealthy official and the mouth of a farmer could both show the signature of bread. Archaeology often makes everyday life visible in the body itself. Teeth become records of diet, technology, and labor. Clothing in Egypt was usually linen, light and breathable for the climate. Men commonly wore kilts or wrapped garments. Women wore close-fitting dresses or draped linen. Children were often lightly clothed or unclothed in early childhood. Elite clothing could be pleated, finely woven, and adorned with jewelry, collars, belts, and elaborate wigs. White linen had associations with cleanliness and ritual purity. Priests shaved body hair and wore fresh linen for temple service. Cosmetics were not merely decorative. Kohl around the eyes reduced glare, had ritual associations, and may have offered some protection against infection due to the chemistry of certain lead-based compounds used in ancient cosmetics. Jewelry in Egypt was beautiful, symbolic, and protective. Gold represented the flesh of the gods and did not tarnish. Lapis lazuli, imported from far beyond Egypt, carried deep blue celestial associations. Turquoise and carnelian were prized for color and protective meaning. Amulets shaped like scarabs, eyes of Horus, jed pillars, Tayat knots, hearts, and deities were worn in life and placed on the dead. A necklace was not only decoration. It could be a miniature theology arranged around the body. Color, material, shape, and placement all mattered. Egyptian adornment was an art of beauty and protection at once. Color in Egyptian art was highly symbolic. Green could suggest growth, renewal, and the living fertility of vegetation. Black, the color of Nile silt, could symbolize fertility and regeneration, which is why Osiris is often shown with green or black skin. Red could be desert, danger, violence, vitality, or power, depending on context. Blue suggested water, sky, creation, and divinity. Gold suggested eternity and the gods. When we look at Egyptian art now, much of the color has faded. But ancient temples, statues, reliefs, and tombs were not bare stone. They were painted, bright, and visually intense. The quiet beige Egypt of museum fragments is often the weathered remains of a much more colorful world. The Egyptian canon of proportion allowed artists to reproduce the human figure consistently across centuries. Figures were often laid out on grids, with key body points aligned to fixed units. This was not a failure of creativity, but a system for preserving order. Egyptian art was less concerned with capturing a fleeting optical moment than with making a permanent, legible, effective image. A tomb painting of a person offering food was not simply decoration. It helped make the offering eternally available. A statue was not merely a portrait. It could serve as a body for the Ka if the physical body was damaged. Art had work to do. Sculptors sometimes left unfinished statues and reliefs that reveal the process behind the final surface. In quarries and workshops, archaeologists find grid lines, guide marks, rough blocking, partially carved faces, abandoned stone, and trial pieces. These unfinished objects are invaluable because perfect finished monuments can make ancient craft look almost effortless. The unfinished pieces show stages, corrections, planning, and human hands. A colossus began as a mass of stone. A face emerged through measured strikes. The smoothness that feels timeless was the result of tools, dust, apprentices, masters, and days of repetitive physical work. The unfinished obelisk at Aswan is one of the most important windows into Egyptian stoneworking. It lies still attached to the bedrock, abandoned after cracks appeared in the granite. If completed, it would have been the largest obelisk ever made, weighing more than 1,000 tons. Its unfinished state shows how obelisks were quarried. Workers carved trenches around the desired stone mass, likely using dolerite, pounding stones harder than the granite, gradually isolating the monolith from the bedrock. The object failed before it became a monument, and precisely because it failed, it teaches us more than a finished obelisk standing in a plaza ever could. The Pyramid Age did not begin with the Great Pyramid. It began with experimentation. The Step Pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, designed under the direction of Imhotep in the 3rd dynasty, began as a mastaba tomb and developed into a 6-stepped stone monument. It was one of the earliest large stone buildings in human history. Imhotep later became legendary as a sage, architect, physician, and eventually a deified figure. The Step Pyramid complex is important not only because of its height, but because it represents a transformation of building technology. Stone architecture imitating earlier forms made from reeds, wood, and mud brick, but now intended for eternity. Sneferu, the first king of the 4th dynasty, built more pyramid volume than any other pharaoh and appears to have presided over the technical learning curve that made the Great Pyramid possible. The Mitam Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, and the Red Pyramid show experimentation with angles, stability, casing, and internal arrangement. The Bent Pyramid at Dashur changes angle partway up, likely because structural concerns forced a reduction in slope. The Red Pyramid, also at Dashur, is the first successful true smooth-sided pyramid. By the time Khufu's pyramid was built at Giza, Egyptian engineers had already learned through trial, adjustment, and enormous investment in stone how to make a pyramid stand. The Great Pyramid was not an isolated object. It was part of a larger pyramid complex including a valley temple, a causeway, a mortuary temple, subsidiary pyramids, boat pits, cemeteries for officials, and the broader sacred landscape of Giza. Royal pyramids were not simply stone mountains over graves. They were ritual machines embedded in architecture, procession, offerings, solar theology, and kingship. Priests maintained mortuary cults after the king's death, bringing offerings and performing rituals to sustain the king's transformed existence. The pyramid itself was the most visible part of a continuing institution. The discovery of the Wadi al-Jarf papyri, including the diary of an official named Mirror, gave modern scholars a rare contemporary administrative glimpse into pyramid construction under Khufu. Mirror's diary records the transport of limestone by boat from Tura to Giza, naming places, teams, and movements along waterways. It does not solve every mystery of pyramid construction, but it removes much of the need for fantasy. We see organization, boats, crews, quarries, canals, accounting, and state logistics. The pyramid was not built by aliens, lost superscience, or unexplained magic. It was built by a society capable of mobilizing people, food, boats, stone, geometry, and administrative memory at a scale that still feels astonishing. The question of how the blocks were raised remains debated, but the debate is within engineering and archaeology, not outside them. Straight ramps, zigzag ramps, spiral ramps, internal ramps, levering systems, and combinations of methods have all been proposed. It is possible that different stages of construction used different systems. What matters most is that the Egyptians did not need impossible technology. They had sledges, ropes, levers, ramps, water transport, skilled surveyors, experienced crews, and an administrative system capable of coordinating repetitive labor with remarkable precision. Ancient engineering often looks impossible when we imagine only the finished monument and forget the thousands of small, solvable tasks that led to it. The pyramid texts, first appearing in the Pyramid of Unas at the end of the 5th dynasty, are the oldest large body of religious texts from ancient Egypt. Carved inside royal pyramids, they consist of spells, utterances, and rituals intended to help the deceased king ascend to the sky, join the gods, and survive death. They are older than the coffin texts and much older than the Book of the Dead. Their language is dense, poetic, and sometimes difficult to interpret. They imagine the king climbing ladders to the heavens, flying as a bird, becoming an imperishable star, joining the sun god, and taking a place among divine powers. In them, the pyramid becomes not simply a tomb, but a launch point into cosmic geography. Egyptian religion was not static. It changed over time, absorbed local cults, merged gods, elevated some deities, and diminished others. A god who was locally important in one period could become nationally dominant in another. Ammonius rose from a Theban deity to one of the most powerful gods of the empire. Osiris became increasingly central to afterlife hope. Ra, Atum, Ta, Khnum, Neith, Hathor, Isis, Horus, and many others could be interpreted through different theological systems without forcing a single rigid doctrine. Egyptian religion was comfortable with multiplicity. A god could be one and many. A creation story could be true in one temple tradition without requiring every other creation story to be false. The idea of Ma'at was one of the most important concepts in Egyptian thought. It meant truth, order, balance, justice, rightness, and cosmic harmony. It was not only an ethical idea. It was the condition that allowed the universe to continue. The sun rose because Ma'at was maintained. The Nile flood came because order had not collapsed into chaos. Courts judged disputes according to Ma'at. Kings offered Ma'at to the gods in temple scenes, symbolically presenting order back to the divine source. The opposite of Ma'at was Isfit, disorder, violence, falsehood, and chaos. Egyptian politics, religion, law, and morality were all framed as struggles to maintain the fragile order of the world. Egyptian law was not preserved as a single code like the law code of Hammurabi, but legal documents show a functioning system of contracts, property transfers, wills, adoptions, marriage arrangements, divorces, accusations, testimony, and judgments. Local councils, officials, priests, and royal authorities could all play roles. Written records mattered. Witnesses mattered. Oaths mattered. Women could bring cases, own property, inherit, and enter contracts. This does not mean Egyptian society was modern or equal in every sense, but by ancient standards, the legal agency of Egyptian women was striking. A woman could manage her own property in a way that would have surprised many later Greek observers. Family life centered on household, property, children, ancestors, and practical continuity. Marriage did not usually involve a formal religious ceremony like later traditions. It was often a domestic and legal arrangement recognized by cohabitation and property agreements. Love poetry shows desire and tenderness. Legal documents show negotiation and inheritance. Tomb scenes show idealized family unity. Children were valued, and high infant mortality made survival precious. Toys, dolls, miniature animals, balls, and games survive from archaeological contexts. They remind us that ancient Egypt was not only kings and corpses. It was also children playing near courtyards, parents worrying, siblings arguing, and families eating bread in the shade. Education was mostly for boys destined for scribal or administrative roles, though some elite women were literate. School exercises often include moral instruction praising the scribal profession and mocking the hardships of manual trades. These texts were biased, of course, because they were written by scribes for scribes. But they reveal how literacy imagined itself as a path away from the heat of the field, the danger of military life, and the exhausting work of crafts. The schoolboy who learned signs by copying them again and again was entering a profession that could outlive muscle. The hand that held the reed pen could command grain, labor, memory, and status. Music and dance were present in religious ritual, banquets, festivals, and private enjoyment. Harps, lutes, flutes, double pipes, rattles, sistrums, drums, and clappers appear in art and archaeological finds. The sistrum, a rattle associated especially with Hathor and Isis, produced a shimmering sound used in temple ritual and celebration. Tomb scenes show dancers and musicians at banquets, sometimes with remarkable grace and movement. Because the actual music is mostly lost, Egyptian music is one of the great silences of history. We can see the instruments, the gestures, the singers, and the dancers, but the melodies themselves have vanished. Board games were another important part of leisure and symbolic life. Senet, one of the oldest known board games, was played for more than 2,000 years. Boards and pieces have been found in tombs, including Tutankhamun's. Over time, Senet acquired religious meaning, becoming associated with the journey through the afterlife. Another game, Mehen, involved a coiled serpent board. Games are small things compared to pyramids, but they reveal mental life, strategy, chance, competition, amusement, and the pleasure of patterned rules. A person moving pieces across a board in a lamp-lit room 4,000 years ago was doing something recognizably human. Egyptian medicine combined observation, practical treatment, ritual, and magic. To modern readers, the mixture can seem strange, but it reflects a world in which illness could be understood physically, spiritually, and socially at once. The Edwin Smith Papyrus is especially striking because of its calm case-by-case method: examination, diagnosis, prognosis, treatment. It describes injuries in a way that shows careful clinical observation. Other medical texts include spells and remedies side by side. A physician might set a fracture, apply honey to a wound because of its useful physical properties, and recite protective words against invisible forces. The distinction between medicine and magic that feels obvious now was not obvious in the same way then. Honey was widely used in wound treatment in ancient cultures, including Egypt, and modern science helps explain why it could be effective. Honey is acidic, has low water activity, can produce hydrogen peroxide in some conditions, and creates an environment hostile to many bacteria. The Egyptians did not need to understand microbiology to notice that certain substances helped wounds heal better. Ancient medicine often worked through empirical pattern recognition. If a dressing repeatedly reduced infection or odor, it could become part of medical practice even without a modern mechanism. This is one reason ancient medical texts deserve more respect than simple dismissal as superstition. Egyptian dentistry, by contrast, seems to have been limited. Tooth wear, abscesses, and dental infections were common, especially among adults. Some dental treatments were attempted, and there are rare examples of dental work, but Egyptian medicine never developed modern restorative dentistry. The problem was severe because grit and bread wore teeth down over a lifetime. In mummies, dental disease can be one of the most visible signs of suffering. A golden coffin may contain a person who endured years of mouth pain. Archaeology often restores grandeur to history, but it also restores discomfort. The famous wooden and leather prosthetic toe found on a mummy from Thebes is one of the most remarkable examples of ancient prosthetic technology. It appears to have been functional, not merely cosmetic. Experimental work with replicas suggests that it could have helped with walking in sandals after the loss of a big toe, which is important because the big toe plays a major role in balance and push-off. This small object is deeply moving. It is not a royal monument or a theological text. It is an engineered response to a person's bodily problem. Someone lost a toe, and someone made a replacement that allowed that person to move more normally. Mummification also became a source of anatomical knowledge, though not in the same way as Greek dissection or modern anatomy. Embalmers handled organs, cavities, tissues, and bodily decay. Priests and physicians knew practical things about the body, but Egyptian theories still placed the heart, not the brain, at the center of thought and identity. The brain was often removed and discarded during mummification, while the heart was preserved because it would be weighed in the afterlife. From a modern perspective, this is anatomically wrong. From an Egyptian religious perspective, it made sense. The heart was the moral and conscious center, the seat of memory, character, and truth. The Valley of the Kings was a solution to a problem created by visible monuments. Pyramids were powerful symbols, but they were also advertisements to tomb robbers. New Kingdom kings chose hidden rock-cut tombs in a remote valley, hoping secrecy would protect the burial. The walls of these tombs were decorated with complex underworld books: the Amduat, the Book of Gates, the Book of Caverns, the Litany of Ra, and other compositions mapping the sun god's night journey through the underworld. These texts were not meant primarily for the living public. They were cosmic guides, transforming the tomb into a map of night, danger, regeneration, and dawn. The tomb of Seti I, discovered by Giovanni Belzoni in 1817, is one of the most spectacular in the Valley of the Kings. Its corridors and chambers are covered with finely carved and painted religious texts and images. The quality of the relief is extraordinary, and the tomb extends deep into the mountain. Belzoni's discovery electrified European interest in Egypt, though early excavation methods were often destructive by modern standards. The history of Egyptology is full of this tension. The same early explorers who preserved knowledge also damaged sites, removed objects, and treated Egyptian heritage as a treasure field for European museums. Modern archaeology is much more careful. Excavation now involves mapping, photography, conservation, stratigraphy, environmental sampling, radiocarbon dating, residue analysis, CT scanning, DNA work where preservation allows, and collaboration with Egyptian authorities. The goal is no longer simply to find spectacular objects, but to understand context. A broken pot in the right layer can be more informative than a golden object without provenance. Archaeology has learned, sometimes through its own mistakes, that objects are not isolated treasures. They are evidence, and evidence loses meaning when it is torn from its context. The Rosetta Stone is famous because it provided a bridge between known and unknown scripts, but its story also shows the political history of archaeology. It was found in 1799 by French forces during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign and later passed to the British after the French defeat. Today it remains in the British Museum, while Egypt has repeatedly called for the return of major artifacts taken during colonial and imperial periods. The stone itself carries a decree from 196 BCE in 3 scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek. The Greek text made comparison possible. Champollion's breakthrough was realizing that hieroglyphs were not merely symbolic pictures, but could represent sounds, including the sounds of Egyptian language preserved in Coptic. Coptic is the last stage of the ancient Egyptian language, written mostly with Greek letters plus a few signs from Demotic. It remained in religious use among Egyptian Christians and became crucial for understanding older Egyptian. Without Coptic, hieroglyphic decipherment would have been much harder. This is one of the elegant continuities in Egyptian history. The language of pharaohs survived, transformed, in the liturgy of a later religious community. Ancient Egypt did not disappear all at once. Its language, images, places, and habits passed through Greek, Roman, Christian, and Islamic Egypt in complicated layers. The city of Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, belonged to the final phase of ancient Egyptian history but became one of the greatest intellectual centers of the ancient world. Under the Ptolemies, Alexandria housed the famous library and museum, institutions associated with scholars, poets, mathematicians, astronomers, physicians, and geographers. Euclid worked there. Eratosthenes, who calculated the circumference of the Earth with remarkable accuracy, directed the library. Herophilus and Erasistratus advanced anatomical study in ways that shocked later traditions. Alexandria was Greek-speaking and cosmopolitan, but it stood on Egyptian soil at the mouth of the Nile, connected to the older civilization even as it transformed it. The Pharos of Alexandria, the great lighthouse built on the island of Pharos in the 3rd century BCE, was another of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It guided ships into Alexandria's harbors and may have stood over 100 meters high. Like the pyramids, it combined engineering, state power, and symbolism. It announced Alexandria as a city of light, navigation, learning, and royal ambition. Earthquakes eventually damaged and destroyed it, and stones from the lighthouse were later reused in the medieval Kate Bay Citadel. The monument vanished, but the word Pharos became a word for lighthouse in multiple languages, preserving the structure in vocabulary long after the structure itself was gone. Egyptian boats were essential. The Nile was the main highway, and the prevailing winds generally blew from north to south, while the river flowed from south to north, allowing boats to sail upstream with wind and drift or row downstream with current. This made Egypt unusually integrated as a riverine state. Stone, grain, soldiers, officials, letters, cattle, wood, and ceremonial processions all moved by water. Boat burials near pyramids, including the famous Khufu ship, show the ritual importance of vessels as well. A boat could carry goods, a king, a god statue, or the soul of the dead through cosmic waters. The Khufu ship, discovered in a sealed pit beside the Great Pyramid in 1954, is one of the oldest and largest ancient boats ever found. It had been dismantled into more than 1,000 pieces and carefully buried. When reconstructed, it measured over 40 meters long. Whether it had been used in life, intended for the afterlife, or built specifically as a solar or funerary vessel remains debated, but its craftsmanship is extraordinary. It shows that pyramid builders were not only stone engineers. They were also expert woodworkers and boat builders capable of shaping imported cedar into complex, seaworthy forms using joinery, rope lashings, and careful design. Egypt did not have abundant large timber, which made wood valuable. Cedar from Lebanon was especially prized for ships, coffins, doors, and elite furniture. The need for timber helped connect Egypt to the Levant through trade and diplomacy. Gold from Nubia, incense from Punt, turquoise and copper from Sinai, silver and horses from Western Asia, and luxury materials from across the Eastern Mediterranean entered Egyptian networks. Ancient Egypt can look isolated because the desert frames it so sharply, but it was never completely isolated. It was part of an interconnected Bronze Age world of trade, gifts, marriages, alliances, rivalries, and war. The Amarna letters reveal that world vividly. Written mostly in Akkadian cuneiform, the diplomatic language of the Late Bronze Age, they preserve correspondence between Egyptian pharaohs and rulers of Babylon, Assyria, Mitanni, the Hittites, and smaller Levantine city-states. Kings call each other brother while negotiating gold, brides, gifts, military assistance, and prestige. Vassal rulers complain, flatter, panic, and plead for archers. The letters show that Egypt's empire was not just monuments along the Nile. It was diplomacy, anxiety, distance, and the constant work of maintaining influence over territories and allies beyond Egypt itself. Egyptian military power changed dramatically over time. In the Old Kingdom, Egypt was mainly a Nile Valley kingdom with expeditions into surrounding regions. In the New Kingdom, after the trauma of Hyksos rule in the Second Intermediate Period, Egypt became an imperial power. The adoption of horse-drawn chariots, composite bows, new military organization, and more aggressive foreign policy transformed Egyptian warfare. Pharaohs campaigned in Nubia and the Levant. Thutmose III fought at Megiddo. Ramesses II fought the Hittites at Kadesh. Victory scenes on temple walls show the king smiting enemies. But the reality of empire was more complicated. Forts, garrisons, tribute, diplomacy, rebellion, negotiation, and administrative control. Nubia, to the south, was not simply a source of gold and soldiers. It was a region with its own powerful cultures, including Kerma, Napata, and later Meroe. Egypt conquered parts of Nubia at different times, built forts, extracted resources, and imposed administration, but Nubian culture also influenced Egypt. The 25th dynasty, often called the Kushite dynasty, ruled Egypt from Nubia and presented itself as a restorer of traditional Egyptian religion and kingship. Its rulers built pyramids in Nubia and honored Ammonius with deep devotion. The relationship between Egypt and Nubia was therefore not a simple story of center and periphery. It was a long, shifting history of trade, conflict, conquest, imitation, resistance, and cultural exchange. The Hyksos, a dynasty of rulers of Western Asian origin who controlled parts of northern Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, were once portrayed in Egyptian tradition as destructive foreigners. Modern archaeology gives a more nuanced picture. Their capital at Avaris in the eastern delta shows strong connections with the Levant. They adopted Egyptian royal titles and cultural forms while maintaining some distinct material culture. They likely introduced or helped spread technologies such as the horse-drawn chariot and certain weapons. Their eventual expulsion by Theban rulers helped spark the militarized New Kingdom, but their story reminds us that Egyptian identity was shaped partly through contact with outsiders. Akhenaten's Amarna period remains one of the strangest and most debated episodes in Egyptian history. His new city, Akhetaten, was built quickly in a previously unused desert bay. Boundaries steely marked its sacred limits. Its temples were open to the sun rather than dark and enclosed like traditional temples. Its art showed elongated bodies, intimate royal family scenes, and the Aten's rays ending in tiny hands offering life. The revolution did not last. After Akhenaten's death, the city was abandoned, the traditional gods restored, and later kings tried to erase him from official memory. But the failed revolution left an archaeological time capsule. Houses, workshops, letters, art, and traces of a court trying to remake religion around sunlight. Tutankhamun's fame is therefore partly accidental. He was a young king who restored traditional religion after Amarna, died young, and was buried in a relatively small tomb. Because the tomb was hidden and largely undisturbed, he became the most visible pharaoh to the modern imagination. The objects found with him show not only royal wealth but craftsmanship. Beds with animal forms, chariots, bows, sandals, linen garments, cosmetic containers, games, ritual boats, shrines, jewelry, walking sticks, food, wine jars, and nested coffins. The tomb is a compressed world of royal afterlife equipment, a small chamber filled with the material imagination of eternity. The so-called Curse of Tutankhamun belongs more to modern media than to ancient belief. After Lord Carnarvon died in 1923, newspapers sensationalized the idea of a curse on those who disturbed the tomb. In reality, many people closely involved in the excavation lived for decades afterward, including Howard Carter himself. Ancient Egyptians did sometimes place protective formulas or warnings in tomb contexts, but the popular curse story reflects early 20th century fascination, fear, colonial anxiety, and commercial journalism more than Egyptian theology. The real wonder of Tutankhamun's tomb is not that it killed people. It is that it preserved a royal burial assemblage with such extraordinary completeness. Animal mummification was a major religious practice, especially in the late period and Ptolemaic era. Cats, ibises, falcons, crocodiles, dogs, fish, snakes, and other animals were mummified as offerings to deities associated with those animals. Some were beloved pets buried with care. Many others were bred, raised, killed, and mummified as votive offerings in large temple economies. This can feel unsettling, but it shows the scale of devotional practice and the economic organization of temples. Millions of animal mummies were produced. They are not curiosities. They are evidence of worship, industry, pilgrimage, priestly management, and the complicated relationship between animals and gods. Egyptian attitudes toward animals were not sentimental in the modern sense, but they were deeply attentive. Animals could embody divine powers without being gods in a simplistic way. A falcon could evoke Horus's sky power. A jackal could evoke Anubis because jackals lived near desert cemeteries. A scarab beetle rolling a dung ball could symbolize the sun's movement and rebirth. A cow could evoke Hathor's nourishment and maternal presence. The animal world supplied the Egyptians with a vocabulary for understanding divine qualities: speed, danger, protection, fertility, transformation, watchfulness, and renewal. The scarab is one of the most recognizable Egyptian symbols. Dung beetles rolling balls of dung seemed to the Egyptians to mirror the movement of the sun across the sky. The young beetles emerging from the ball suggested spontaneous generation and rebirth. The god Khepri, associated with the rising sun, was depicted as a scarab or scarab-headed man. Scarab amulets were worn in life and placed with the dead. Heart scarabs were placed over the chest of mummies and inscribed with spells asking the heart not to testify against the deceased during judgment. A small beetle became a symbol of cosmic renewal. Egyptian festivals brought gods out of their temples and into social life. During the Opet festival, the god Ammonius, along with Mut and Khonsu, traveled from Karnak to Luxor in a sacred procession, renewing kingship and divine energy. The beautiful festival of the valley brought the god's image across the Nile to the west bank, connecting temples of the living with mortuary temples and the dead. These festivals included music, offerings, processions, crowds, and emotional participation. For most ordinary people, the festival may have been the closest direct contact with the divine image they could experience. The god who normally lived hidden in the sanctuary became, for a short time, visible in movement. Temples were economic institutions as well as religious ones. Major temples owned land, employed workers, managed herds, stored grain, produced textiles, ran workshops, and controlled resources. Priests were not only ritual specialists, but administrators. The wealth of temples could become enormous, especially in the New Kingdom, when the priesthood of Ammonius at Thebes accumulated power that sometimes rivaled royal authority. This helps explain why Akhenaten's attack on traditional cults was not merely theological. To redirect worship was also to redirect wealth, labor, land, and political influence. The architecture of Egyptian temples guided movement from light to darkness. A visitor might pass through a monumental pylon into an open courtyard, then into a columned hall, then into smaller, darker, more restricted chambers, until reaching the sanctuary where the cult's statue rested. The farther inward one moved, the more sacred and exclusive the space became. The roof lowered, the light diminished, the air cooled. The architecture itself performed theology, from the bright world outside to the hidden presence of the god at the center. This controlled sensory experience was part of the power of the temple. Abu Simbel is one of the most dramatic examples of royal temple architecture and modern conservation. Built by Ramesses II in Nubia, the Great Temple's facade shows 4 colossal seated figures of the king. Twice a year, sunlight penetrates the temple's axis and illuminates statues in the inner sanctuary, a phenomenon often discussed in relation to royal and solar symbolism. In the 20th century, the construction of the Aswan High Dam threatened to submerge Abu Simbel beneath Lake Nasser. An international UNESCO campaign cut the temples into massive blocks and relocated them to higher ground. The rescue of Abu Simbel became a landmark in global heritage preservation. The Aswan High Dam changed the Nile in ways ancient Egyptians could never have imagined. It controlled the flood that had structured Egyptian life for millennia, produced hydroelectric power, and expanded irrigation reliability, but it also trapped the silt that once renewed the fields naturally and submerged archaeological landscapes in Nubia. Modern Egypt gained control over water at a massive scale, but the old annual rhythm of inundation, emergence, and harvest was fundamentally altered. The story of ancient Egypt and the story of modern Egypt meet in the management of the same river. Egyptian quarrying sites preserve traces of labor and organization that finished monuments hide. At Gebel el-Silsila, Hatnub, Aswan, Tura, and other quarries, inscriptions record expeditions, officials, worker groups, and royal projects. Quarry marks, unfinished blocks, ramps, roads, and tool marks show how stone moved from geology into architecture. A temple wall begins as a cliff. A statue begins as a selected mass of stone. The transformation required quarrymen, transport crews, boatmen, scribes, overseers, draftsmen, sculptors, polishers, painters, and priests. Every monument is the visible end of a long chain of specialized work. The desert preserved not only tombs, but also mining expeditions. In Sinai, Egyptians mined turquoise and copper, leaving inscriptions in harsh landscapes far from the Nile. In the eastern desert, expeditions sought gold, greywacke, amethyst, and other stones. These expeditions required water planning, routes, guards, donkeys, food supplies, and knowledge of desert travel. The Red Land was dangerous, but it was not empty. It contained resources that kings needed to build, adorn, trade, and display power. Egyptian civilization was river-based, but its wealth also depended on journeys into dry and difficult places. The ordinary farmer remains harder to see than the king, but not invisible. Tomb scenes, tools, settlement remains, administrative documents, and agricultural models show plowing, sowing, harvesting, threshing, winnowing, irrigation, cattle management, fishing, and fowling. The Egyptian year was physical. It required bending, carrying, cutting, grinding, lifting water, tending animals, and repairing dikes. The state's monuments rested on agricultural surplus, and that surplus rested on millions of repetitive acts performed by people whose names were usually not preserved. A pyramid is also a field, because without grain there is no workforce. The ancient Egyptian economy did not operate primarily through coinage for most of its history. Value was often measured in units of grain, copper, silver weight, or other commodities, and workers were paid in rations of bread, beer, grain, oil, fish, vegetables, and textiles. This does not mean there was no market exchange. People traded, bought, sold, loaned, and contracted. But the administrative economy was deeply redistributive. Temples and the state collected resources and issued them out again. A worker's wage might arrive as sacks of grain. A delay in grain delivery could become a political problem. Accounting was survival. Egyptian time was full of festivals and work schedules, but also of unlucky days. Calendars of lucky and unlucky days advised caution, celebration, or avoidance based on mythological associations. A day connected to a dangerous divine event might be considered inauspicious. This kind of calendar shows how myth entered everyday decision-making. Time was not neutral. It had texture, memory, and danger. To a modern mind, this may seem irrational, but the principle is familiar. people still treat anniversaries, holidays, and dates of disaster as emotionally charged. The Egyptians extended that sense into a religious map of the year. Dreams mattered in Egypt. Dream books survive that list dream images and their possible meanings, classifying them as good or bad. A person might sleep in a temple or sacred space seeking a healing dream or divine message. Dreams were part of a broader ancient understanding that the boundary between visible and invisible worlds was porous. To dream of certain animals, objects, or events could be interpreted as a sign. This does not mean Egyptians could not distinguish waking reality from dreams. It means dreams were treated as meaningful experiences that might carry information from beyond ordinary consciousness. Magic, or Heka, was not fringe superstition in ancient Egypt. It was understood as one of the forces by which the world operated. The gods used Heka. Humans could use it through spells, amulets, ritual words, images, and materials. A medical treatment might include both a physical remedy and a spoken formula, because both were considered active. Words had power. Images had power. Names had power. To know the true name of a being could give influence over it. This makes Egyptian texts and images more than representation. They were tools acting on reality. Names were essential to survival after death. To erase a person's name was to attack their memory and continued existence. This is why damnatio memoriae, the deliberate removal of names and images, was so serious. Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, and others suffered forms of erasure, though rarely complete. Conversely, to speak or write the name of the dead helped sustain them. Tomb inscriptions asked passers-by to say offering formulas aloud. A name carved in stone could outlast the body, the family, and the city. In Egypt, memory was not passive. It was a form of ongoing life. Ushabti figures were small funerary servants placed in tombs to work for the deceased in the afterlife. The word is often associated with the idea of answering. The figure would answer when the deceased was called to labor. Many Ushabtis carry hoes or baskets and are inscribed with spells compelling them to perform agricultural work in the next world. Wealthy burials could contain hundreds, one for every day of the year plus overseers. They reveal a charming contradiction in Egyptian afterlife imagination. The field of reeds was an ideal Egypt, but even paradise might require irrigation and farming, so the elite brought little workers to do it for them. The field of reeds was not an abstract heaven of clouds and light. It was an idealized Egypt: fields, canals, grain, family, offerings, and abundance. The Egyptian afterlife was compelling because it imagined continuity. The dead hoped to eat, drink, sail, farm, worship, reunite, and exist in a perfected version of the ordered world they knew. This is one reason tombs were filled with practical objects. The afterlife was not only spiritual. It required sandals, beds, cosmetics, tools, food, furniture, clothing, and words. Eternity was imagined through the material details of life. Tomb robbery was a persistent problem throughout Egyptian history. Royal tombs contained gold, jewelry, precious materials, and objects that could be sold or melted down. Ancient records preserve investigations of tomb robberies, including confessions and trials. The state tried to protect royal mummies by moving them to secret caches, which is why many famous pharaohs were eventually found not in their original tombs, but hidden together in reburials. The survival of mummies such as Ramesses II and Seti I is partly the result of ancient damage control by priests and officials who recognized that the royal dead were no longer safe where they had first been placed. The royal mummy caches discovered at Deir el-Bahri and in the tomb of Amenhotep II transformed knowledge of New Kingdom kings. To look at the mummy of Ramesses II is to confront a person who was both a historical ruler and a body. Old, tooth-worn, arthritic, preserved through ritual and chemistry. Modern imaging allows researchers to study mummies without unwrapping them destructively. CT scans can reveal bone disease, dental problems, amulets, embalming techniques, trauma, and age-related changes. The mummy becomes a medical document, an archaeological artifact, and a human presence at once. Egyptian embalmers used natron to dry the body, but mummification chemistry also involved resins, oils, fats, beeswax, plant extracts, and bitumen in later periods. These substances had practical and symbolic roles: drying, sealing, perfuming, protecting, and transforming. The blackened appearance of some mummies comes from resinous materials rather than simple decay. Embalming recipes changed over time and by budget. A royal mummy and a modest burial did not receive the same treatment. Mummification was not one technique, but a spectrum of practices shaped by period, region, wealth, theology, and available materials. The Egyptian sense of the body after death was complex because a person was not a single simple soul. The Ka, Ba, Ak, shadow, name, heart, and body all mattered in different ways. The Ba could move, often depicted as a human-headed bird. The Ka needed offerings. The Ak was the effective, transfigured spirit. The body served as an anchor. The name preserved identity. These components could be separated, threatened, reunited, and sustained through ritual. Egyptian funerary religion can seem elaborate because it was trying to solve a profound problem: how to keep personhood intact across death. Egyptian architecture often aligned with celestial, solar, or topographical meaning, but not every alignment was mysterious or mathematically exotic. Temples could be oriented toward sunrise on specific festival days, toward the Nile, toward earlier sacred structures, or according to practical site constraints. The temptation to find secret codes in every angle of Egyptian monuments is modern and often misleading. The real achievements are already extraordinary without exaggeration. Surveying, leveling, quarrying, transport, labor organization, astronomical observation, and symbolic planning are enough. Egypt does not need fantasy to be astonishing. The Sphinx has attracted endless speculation, but the geological and archaeological evidence places it firmly within Old Kingdom monument building at Giza. Its body was carved from local limestone, with different layers weathering at different rates. It has been repaired many times, beginning already in antiquity. Thutmose IV's dream stela, placed between the Sphinx's paws, tells a story in which the young prince slept near the buried Sphinx and dreamed that the god promised him kingship if he cleared the sand. Whether the story records a real dream, a political claim, or both, it shows that the Sphinx was already ancient and partially buried by the New Kingdom. The Great Pyramid's original casing stones would have made it shine. The rough stepped surface visible today is not how it first appeared. The pyramid was covered in fine white Tura limestone, fitted and polished to create smooth faces. Under the Egyptian sun, the monument would have reflected light intensely, appearing not as a brownstone ruin, but as a brilliant geometric form rising from the plateau. At the top, a pyramidion may have been covered in electrum or gold-like metal, catching the sun. The pyramid was architecture, theology, and controlled light. Light mattered throughout Egyptian religion. The sun god's daily journey across the sky and nightly journey through the underworld structured myths of death and rebirth. Tombs on the west bank were linked to the setting sun. Obelisks caught sunlight. Temple axes could stage dawn illumination. The Aten religion made sunlight itself the central divine presence. Even in more traditional religion, the sun's reliability was a model of cosmic order. Every morning, the world was renewed. Every sunset, the sun entered danger. Every dawn, order defeated chaos again. Egyptian creation myths differed by city. At Heliopolis, Creation centered on Adam emerging from the primeval waters and generating the first divine pair. At Memphis, Ta created through heart and tongue, thought and speech, making the world through divine intellect and word. At Hermopolis, creation involved the Ogdoad, 8 primordial deities associated with chaos before creation. These accounts were not necessarily treated as mutually exclusive. Each temple tradition could present its god as central to creation. Egyptian theology allowed layered truth. Creation could be spoken in more than one sacred language. The concept of the primeval mound appears again and again. The Nile flood left islands of emerging land as water receded, and Egyptian creation imagination pictured the first land rising from the waters of chaos. Temple architecture may echo this idea, with the sanctuary as a symbolic mound of first creation. The Benben stone, associated with Heliopolis, and the pyramid shape itself have been linked to this imagery of emergence, sunlight, and creation. The landscape of the Nile gave religious imagination its shapes. Each year the waters withdrew and black earth appeared again. Creation was not only mythic, it was seasonal. The role of the queen and royal women was often politically significant even when kingship was male. Queens could serve as king's mother, great royal wife, regent, priestess, diplomatic bride, landholder, and symbolic partner in royal theology. The title God's wife of Ammonius became especially important in later periods, giving royal women major religious and economic authority at Thebes. Powerful women such as Ahotep, Hatshepsut, Tai, Nefertiti, and Cleopatra VII shaped politics in different ways. Egyptian history is not a history of men alone, even if the official language of kingship was overwhelmingly masculine. Nefertiti remains one of the most famous faces from ancient Egypt because of the painted bust found in the workshop of the sculptor Thutmose at Amarna. The bust is not simply beautiful. It is a masterpiece of controlled asymmetry, color, and royal image making. Nefertiti appears prominently in Amarna art, sometimes in positions of ritual and power unusual for queens. Her later fate remains debated. Some theories identify her with a later ruler under another name, while others see her disappearing from the record before the end of Akhenaten's reign. The uncertainty is part of the fascination. Egyptian evidence can be abundant and still leave crucial questions open. Cleopatra VII was not ethnically Egyptian in the old dynastic sense. She belonged to the Macedonian Greek Ptolemaic dynasty. But she was the first Ptolemaic ruler known to have learned the Egyptian language, and she presented herself through both Greek and Egyptian political traditions. The popular image of Cleopatra as merely a seductress is a Roman political reduction shaped by her enemies. She was a multilingual ruler, naval strategist, political negotiator, mother, and monarch trying to preserve Egypt's independence during the violent transformation of the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. Her death ended pharaonic rule, but not Egypt's cultural afterlife. Egypt's relationship with Greece was long and complicated before Alexander. Greek mercenaries served in Egypt. Greek traders lived in Naucratis in the Delta. Egyptian statues, ideas, and stories circulated in the Greek imagination. Greek travelers such as Herodotus wrote about Egypt with a mixture of observation, misunderstanding, admiration, and exoticism. To the Greeks, Egypt was already ancient, a place of deep time and strange wisdom. That Greek fascination shaped later European ideas of Egypt, sometimes productively and sometimes through layers of fantasy that modern Egyptology has had to peel away. The Library of Alexandria has become a symbol of lost knowledge, though the popular image of a single catastrophic burning destroying all ancient wisdom is oversimplified. The library and associated scholarly institutions declined over time through political conflict, changing patronage, fires, neglect, and the broader transformations of the ancient world. Still, Alexandria's intellectual culture was real and extraordinary. Scholars there edited Homer, studied anatomy, measured the earth, developed mathematics, mapped stars, and collected texts from across the Mediterranean. It was one of the great experiments in organized knowledge before the modern university. Egyptian chronology itself is a scientific achievement of reconstruction. Egyptologists build it from king lists, inscriptions, astronomical references, radiocarbon dates, pottery sequences, synchronisms with other ancient Near Eastern histories, and archaeological stratigraphy. The dates often given for reigns and dynasties are not all equally certain. Early periods can have wider margins of uncertainty. Later periods can be more precisely anchored. This is why responsible historical writing often says approximately. Ancient history is not a smooth line of perfect certainty. It is a carefully built structure of evidence, probability, and revision. The Palermo stone and other fragments of royal annals preserve early king lists and events such as Nile flood heights, festivals, and royal actions. Later king lists at Abydos, Saqqara, and Turin preserve sequences of rulers, though sometimes omitting politically problematic kings such as Hatshepsut or the Amarna rulers. King lists were not neutral modern records. They were ideological documents shaping memory. Who was included mattered. Who was omitted mattered. To reconstruct Egyptian history, scholars must read not only what the lists say, but what they choose to forget. Egyptian language itself changed greatly across time. Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic represent stages of a language family evolving across millennia. Middle Egyptian became a classical written form used long after it had ceased to be everyday speech, somewhat like Latin in medieval Europe. This means that an inscription from a later period might use an older prestigious style. Language in Egypt carried tradition. To write in an old form was to place oneself in continuity with the ancestors. The Egyptians measured the body, fields, stone, grain, and time with practical systems. The cubit, based originally on the forearm, was standardized in royal cubit rods divided into palms and fingers. The royal cubit was about 52.3 centimeters, though measures could vary by period and context. Measuring rods found in tombs show the importance of standard units. Without standard measurement, there is no large architecture, no reliable field taxation, no stone fitting, no rationing, and no administrative state. Measurement is one of civilization's quiet foundations. The slope of a pyramid face was described by the sect, a ratio expressing horizontal run per vertical rise using palms per cubit. This was a practical way for Egyptian builders to define angles without trigonometry in the modern sense. The Rhine mathematical papyrus includes problems involving sect calculations. The concept shows that Egyptian mathematics was not abstract theory in the Greek style, but it was powerful practical geometry. It solved real problems. How steep to build, how much grain a granary holds, how many loaves are needed, how to divide land and rations. Egyptian astronomy was also practical and religious rather than theoretical in the later Greek sense. Decans, star groups rising at intervals through the night, were used to divide nighttime hours. Star clocks painted on coffin lids and tomb ceilings reflect this effort to map time through the sky. The diagonal star tables of the Middle Kingdom show how specific stars marked hours during different parts of the year. Timekeeping at night mattered for ritual, temple service, and cosmic order. To know the night sky was to participate in the regulation of sacred time. Water clocks and shadow clocks were used to measure time when stars or sun were available in different ways. A water clock allowed time to be measured indoors or at night by the steady flow of water from a vessel marked with calibrated lines. Shadow clocks used the movement of a shadow in sunlight. These devices were not perfect by modern standards, but they show a sustained interest in dividing and regulating time. Temple rituals required timing. Administration required scheduling. Astronomy, engineering, and bureaucracy all met in the measurement of hours. Egyptian agriculture benefited from animals as well as river water. Cattle were signs of wealth, used for meat, milk, hides, traction, and ritual offerings. Donkeys transported goods across land and desert routes. Sheep and goats supplied meat, milk, and wool or hair, though linen remained the preferred textile for ritual purity. Geese, ducks, and other birds were trapped and raised. Fish from the Nile were abundant and important, especially for ordinary people. Scenes of fishing and fowling in tombs may look like leisure, but they also encode abundance, control over nature, and the ideal provisioning of the afterlife. The desert protected Egypt, but also preserved it. Organic materials decay rapidly in wet environments, but in Egypt's dry sand, objects that would vanish elsewhere can survive for thousands of years. Wooden furniture, baskets, sandals, linen, papyrus, food, flowers, and even garlands have been found. This gives Egyptology an unusual advantage over many ancient histories. We can study not only stone and metal but perishable things. The weave of cloth, the shape of bread, the petals on a funeral wreath, the handwriting of a scribe, the repair on a sandal. The ordinary survives beside the monumental. Garlands and floral collars from tombs show a delicate side of Egyptian material culture. Flowers were placed on mummies, coffins, banquet guests, statues, and offerings. Lotus blossoms, cornflowers, mandrake fruits, palm leaves, and other plant materials carried sensory and symbolic meaning. A dried garland is fragile, but it can preserve a moment of ritual tenderness. Someone gathered plants, arranged them, and placed them with the dead. The survival of such objects makes the emotional world of ancient Egypt visible in a way stone cannot. Perfume was another important sensory art. Egypt produced and imported fragrant oils, resins, incense, myrrh, frankincense, lotus, and other aromatics. Perfume cones shown on banquet guests' heads in tomb paintings may represent scented fat or symbolic fragrance, though their exact physical reality remains debated. Temples used incense in ritual purification. Bodies were anointed in life and death. Scent mattered because it moved invisibly, filled space, and was associated with divine presence. A temple was not only seen, it was smelled. Egyptian furniture could be remarkably refined. Chairs, stools, beds, headrests, boxes, chests, and tables survive from elite tombs, especially Tutankhamun's. Wood was precious, and furniture often combined local and imported materials with inlay, gilding, ivory, ebony, and woven elements. The Egyptian headrest, a curved support for the head rather than a soft pillow, may look uncomfortable to modern eyes, but it allowed airflow and protected elaborate hairstyles or wigs. It also appears in funerary contexts as a protective object. Even sleep furniture had symbolic life. Wigs were common among elites and served practical, social, and aesthetic roles. In a hot climate where shaving the head could reduce lice and heat, wigs allowed elaborate appearance without keeping natural hair long. Wigs could be made from human hair, plant fiber, or combinations, and styled with braids, curls, and scented substances. Hair signaled age, gender, status, fashion, and ritual state. Priests often shaved for purity. Children were shown with the side lock of youth. Mourning could involve dishevelment. The body was a social text. The Egyptian army, labor system, temples, and estates all required food on a large scale, which made storage essential. Granaries were often depicted as rounded or rectangular structures where grain was poured in from above and removed below. Scribes recorded incoming and outgoing quantities. Grain was wealth because it could be stored, redistributed, baked into bread, brewed into beer, and used to support workers. The ability to store grain allowed the state to survive bad years and to mobilize labor for projects far from fields. Storage is less glamorous than monuments, but monuments depend on storage. Famine scenes and texts remind us that the Nile's generosity could fail. The famous famine stela on Sehel Island, though created long after the Old Kingdom setting it describes, tells of a 7-year famine in the time of Djoser and links relief to divine and temple arrangements. Whether historically accurate for Djoser's reign or not, it reflects a real Egyptian fear. When the Nile failed, the world trembled. Food security was theological, political, and practical. A king who could not ensure abundance risked not only hunger, but the impression that Maat itself had weakened. Egyptian craftsmen worked in specialized materials: stone, wood, metal, faience, glass, ivory, bone, leather, and pigment. Egyptian faience, a glazed non-clay ceramic material made from crushed quartz or sand with alkaline glaze, produced brilliant blue-green objects associated with water, fertility, rebirth, and the shimmer of life. Amulets, beads, tiles, figurines, and inlays made of faience could imitate more expensive stones such as turquoise or lapis lazuli while carrying their own luminous beauty. The bright blue tiles of some royal and temple contexts suggest a world of color far richer than bare ruins imply. Glassworking developed in Egypt especially during the New Kingdom, often producing small vessels, beads, and inlays in vivid colors. Glass was a luxury material before it became common. It could imitate precious stones and produce colors difficult to achieve otherwise. The Amarna period and later New Kingdom contexts include beautiful glass objects. To hold such an object in ancient Egypt was to hold controlled fire and chemistry, transformed into color. Material science was not named as such, but craftsmen understood heat, fluxes, minerals, and transformation through embodied practice. Metalworking was essential but limited by available ores and trade. Copper was used early, then bronze, copper alloyed with tin, became important for tools, weapons, and objects. Gold was abundant enough in Egypt and Nubia to become strongly associated with royal and divine imagery. Iron was rare before the first millennium BCE and sometimes meteoritic, giving it a special status. The famous iron dagger from Tutankhamun's tomb was made from meteoritic iron, a metal literally fallen from the sky. To the Egyptians, such material would have carried extraordinary significance even without modern chemical analysis. The ancient Egyptians knew the sky as a religious, agricultural, and navigational space, but they did not develop mathematical astronomy in the same way later Babylonians and Greeks did. Their genius lay more in long-term observation, calendrical regularity, and symbolic integration. Tomb ceilings show stars, constellations, deities, and cosmic maps. Nut, the sky goddess, arches over the world, swallowing the sun in the evening and giving birth to it in the morning. The night sky was not empty space. It was a divine body, a map of time, and a field of transformation. The Milky Way itself may have been understood in relation to celestial water, though Egyptian interpretations of the night sky are often debated. The Egyptians saw the sky through their own symbolic system. Stars could be imperishable, circumpolar, associated with the undying state of the king. Orion was linked with Osiris, Sirius with Isis, the sun's path with rebirth. What we call astronomy and mythology were not separate domains. To observe a star was also to locate it in a divine story. The Great Pyramid's alignment to true north has inspired endless speculation, but the most plausible explanations involve careful stellar observations. Circumpolar stars that never set could be used to establish north through repeated observation of their positions. The precision is astonishing, but not supernatural. It reflects patient measurement, clear skies, and high stakes. A monument built for eternity demanded orientation within cosmic order. Its sides did not simply face directions. They participated in the ordered structure of the world. Egyptian tomb art often shows abundance: piles of food, ducks, cattle, gardens, lotus pools, musicians, servants, boats, fields, and family. These scenes were not merely memories of good times. They functioned as magical and ritual provisions. If offerings failed in the real world, the images could continue to provide. A painted loaf could become, in ritual logic, an eternal loaf. The image was a technology of survival. That is why tomb decoration is often so vivid, detailed, and repetitive. Eternity required redundancy. The false door, a common feature in tombs, was a symbolic passage through which the ka of the deceased could receive offerings. It was carved as a doorway but did not open physically. Instead, it opened ritually between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Offerings placed before it could sustain the deceased. The idea is beautiful in its architectural simplicity, a door that does not move, yet connects worlds. Egyptian architecture often works this way, making invisible relationships visible through stone. Statues also served as dwelling places for spiritual presence. If the mummy was damaged or offerings needed a focus, a statue could provide an alternative body for the ka. This helps explain why statues were made durable, idealized, and inscribed with names. To break the nose of a statue could be an act of symbolic violence, preventing it from breathing. To erase the name could threaten memory. Egyptian images were not passive. They were bodies with functions. The Amarna artistic style, with its elongated heads, narrow limbs, soft bellies, and intimate family scenes, has been interpreted in many ways. Religious symbolism, court style, realism, medical speculation, and political messaging. Most medical explanations are not strongly supported. It is safer to understand Amarna art primarily as a deliberate visual break from tradition, serving Akhenaten's new theology and royal self-presentation. The style shows how art can become a political and religious instrument. Change the gods, and the body of the king changes too. Egyptian art after Amarna largely returned to traditional conventions, but not as if nothing had happened. The restoration under Tutankhamun and his successors was a political act. Names were changed, temples reopened, old gods honored, and the memory of the Amarna heresy suppressed. Yet traces remained in objects, workshops, and artistic details. History rarely resets completely. Even erased periods leave residue. The Ptolemaic period produced temples that many visitors think of as classically Egyptian, including Edfu, Dendera, and Philae. These temples were built under Greek-speaking rulers, but in traditional Egyptian architectural and religious forms, often with inscriptions preserving ancient theology in great detail. This is important because some of the best preserved temples in Egypt are late, not early. They belong to a world after Alexander, when Egypt was culturally layered. Greek rulers, Egyptian priests, traditional gods, new syncretic cults, and Roman power approaching in the distance. The Temple of Philae, associated with Isis, became one of the last strongholds of ancient Egyptian religion. Worship there continued into the Roman and early Byzantine periods, long after Christianity had spread through Egypt. The final known hieroglyphic inscription dates to the 4th century CE, and the last demotic inscription to the 5th century. This means ancient Egyptian writing did not vanish with Cleopatra. It faded slowly, surviving in temple contexts centuries into Roman Egypt. Civilizations end unevenly. Some parts die quickly, others remain like embers. Christian Egypt, or Coptic Egypt, inherited and transformed the landscape. Temples became churches, Old symbols were reinterpreted. Monasticism flourished in the deserts, where earlier Egyptians had seen danger, gods, tombs, and mineral wealth. The desert remained a place of spiritual intensity. The language of the pharaohs lived on in Coptic Christian liturgy. Later, Islamic Egypt added further layers. The land did not stop being Egypt when dynastic Egypt ended. It became many Egypts, stacked in language, religion, architecture, and memory. The modern fascination with ancient Egypt, sometimes called Egyptomania, has appeared in waves. After Napoleon's expedition, after Champollion's decipherment, after the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, and repeatedly through film, fashion, architecture, games, and popular culture. This fascination has produced both serious scholarship and many distortions. Egypt is often treated as mysterious in a way that removes the Egyptians themselves, replacing human skill with aliens, lost races, or vague magic. A more respectful wonder sees the monuments as the work of real people: surveyors, farmers, boatmen, bakers, scribes, quarrymen, priests, artists, and rulers, all operating within a world that was different from ours but not irrational. The decline and eventual end of ancient Egyptian civilization was a long process rather than a sudden collapse. After the end of the New Kingdom around 1069 BCE, Egypt experienced a series of periods of foreign domination interspersed with indigenous rule. Libyan dynasties ruled Egypt for 2 centuries. A Nubian dynasty, the 25th dynasty, ruled for approximately 100 years and was notable for its reverence of traditional Egyptian culture and religion and for its construction of pyramid tombs in Nubia in the ancient Egyptian tradition. The late period saw Persian conquest in 525 BCE, followed by brief periods of indigenous rule and a second Persian conquest. Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BCE and was welcomed as a liberator from Persian rule, visiting the oracle of Ammonius at Siwa and being declared the son of Ammonius, effectively accepting the traditional theological framework of Egyptian kingship. After Alexander's death, Egypt was ruled by the Ptolemaic dynasty, founded by one of Alexander's generals, which combined Greek and Egyptian cultural and religious traditions in a synthesis that produced some of the most remarkable monuments of the ancient world, including the Pharos Lighthouse at Alexandria and the Serapeum. The last Ptolemaic ruler, Cleopatra VII, was a woman of formidable intelligence and political skill who ruled Egypt with considerable success before being drawn into the Roman civil wars, first allying with Julius Caesar and then with Mark Antony, her defeat by Octavian ending with her suicide in 30 BCE and Egypt's incorporation as a Roman province. The legacy of ancient Egypt is one of the most extensive and enduring of any ancient civilization. Its writing system did not become the modern alphabet directly, but Egyptian signs helped shape early alphabetic experiments in the Sinai and Levant, which later contributed to the Phoenician alphabet and, through it, to Greek, Latin, Arabic, and many modern writing systems. Its architectural forms, the obelisk, the column, the monumental gateway, the processional avenue, influenced Greek, Roman, and later Western architecture. Its mathematical and medical knowledge contributed to the wider traditions that eventually fed into Greek science and medicine. Its religious ideas, judgment after death, moral accounting, divine kingship, protective amulets, sacred words, and the hope that death could be crossed rather than merely suffered, echoed through later cultures in complex and indirect ways. And its physical monuments, the pyramids, the Sphinx, the temples of Karnak and Luxor, the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, have been objects of fascination, wonder, and serious study for more than 2,000 years. The most powerful thing about ancient Egypt may be the combination of distance and nearness. The distance is obvious: gods with animal heads, kings buried in pyramids, bodies preserved for eternity, a river measured as destiny. But the nearness is just as strong. People wrote love poems. They complained about late wages. They played board games. They worried about illness. They loved cats. They decorated homes. They feared death. They wanted their names remembered. They worked hard, aged, suffered toothaches, made jokes, and hoped their children would prosper. Ancient Egypt feels mysterious, but much of its power comes from the fact that the people inside it were human in ways we recognize immediately. The desert silence around Egyptian monuments can make the civilization feel frozen, but Egypt was always changing. Capitals moved. Gods rose and fell in prominence. Scripts evolved. Art styles shifted. Foreigners ruled and were absorbed. Technologies arrived. Trade routes changed. Temples expanded. Tomb styles developed. The Old Kingdom was not the New Kingdom. Cleopatra's Egypt was not Khufu's Egypt. To speak of ancient Egypt as one thing is convenient, but it compresses a civilization longer lived than the entire span from classical Greece to the modern world. Its continuity is real, but so is its transformation. If there is one thread that runs through Egyptian civilization, it may be the desire to hold order against time. The Nile flood returned each year, but never exactly the same. The sun rose each morning, but only after passing through danger. Bodies died, but could be preserved. Names faded, but could be carved. Fields dried, but could be irrigated. Chaos pressed from desert, disease, famine, invasion, and death, and Egyptian culture responded with calendars, rituals, walls, texts, tombs, laws, offerings, measurements, and monuments. The civilization was not obsessed with death in a morbid sense. It was obsessed with continuity. That is why ancient Egypt remains so compelling at night, when the mind naturally turns toward time, memory, and the fragile order of a human life. Egypt asks what can endure. Stone can endure. Names can endure if written and read. Images can endure if protected from light and weather. A body can endure if dried and wrapped. A story can endure if copied. But everything also changes. Temples lose color. Pyramids lose casing. Languages fall silent. Kings are forgotten. And sand enters rooms meant to last forever. Still, enough remained. Enough remained for a stone with 3 scripts to reopen a language. Enough remained for a young king's tomb to show the material imagination of eternity. Enough remained for a worker's village to tell us about wages and illness. Enough remained for medical papyri to reveal observation, for love poems to reveal longing, for quarry marks to reveal labor, for bread ovens to reveal daily nourishment, and for mummies to reveal the bodies behind the masks. The Nile still flows. The desert still preserves. The stars that guided calendars and temple rituals still rise into the same sky, though the names and stories around them have changed. The monuments are weathered now, and much of their paint is gone, but the civilization that made them has not vanished completely. It survives in stone, in papyrus, in bodies, in tools, in mathematics, in language, in memory, and in the continuing work of people who study it carefully. And tonight, that is enough. Sleep well. Good night.